So James, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Will. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Nice, really is great. So I'm a huge fan of personal development, huge fan of the law of attraction, and a fan of your work in terms of the mission that you've been on for so many years now. And I know that it's something you're super committed to. But as we know on our own personal development journeys, and as we're navigating our way through our own personal development journeys, certain things happen, and we have our own lessons to come up against, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But for people that maybe aren't so familiar with the law of attraction, and maybe that they've heard of the book The Secret, which of course commercialized a lot of the law of attraction and made it very popular way back in sort of coming up to 15 years ago now. How do you define the law of attraction, and how have you seen it benefit so many people since you've been studying it?
Well, I define it very differently than most people, quite frankly. I'm very grateful to have been part of the book The Secret and the movie, and I'm supposedly one of the world experts on the law of attraction, and yet it's a lot more complex, Will, than what the book or the movie really laid out. And that the book and the movie were put together by the producer, who's a good friend, dear friend of mine, Rhonda Byrne. And it was basically meant for a beginning introduction, because here's the scientific law, is the law of vibration. That's the real law. The law of attraction is not a law. It's a subset of the law of vibration. And what the law of vibration tells us, I'm a big fan of quantum physics. I've studied it for well over 2 decades, is that every single thing in this universe is comprised of energy. That energy is conscious. It's not unconscious, it's consciousness. And number 3, it's in a high state of vibration. And it goes anywhere from 2 cycles per second all the way up to 10 billion cycles per second. And it actually goes further than that, but that's our instrumentation only allows us to measure up to 10 billion cycles per second, but that's really fast. And so basically what The Secret talked about is that like attracts like, and that's partially true. And yet it's incomplete, because if that were true, then every single one of us males would be attracted to other males. And some of us are, and that's cool if you are. Some of us are attracted to females. So how do you say like attracts like? It's got to be more complex than that. And the other thing that has caused problems with those who have just done a cursory study of the law of attraction is that they tend to believe that all they have to do is think about something and it's going to land in your lap. Well, how's that one working for you? Because if you sit around visualizing something all day long, they're going to come take your furniture away, right? And then on top of that, we tend to believe that if I'm understanding the law of attraction, nothing, quote, bad is ever going to happen to me. Well, that's illusion as well. So I don't know how much you want to dive into this, but it's a lot more complex than a cursory overview that says I just need to think about it and it's going to and visualize it and put it on a vision board and it's going to come into my life. I'm not saying those things don't have value. Of course they do. But as I said earlier, like attracts like is partially true, but it's incomplete.
So, I mean, you also mentioned vibration, right? So you're talking about being at a vibrational match. So you gave the great example of I'm a guy, you're a guy. We're not attracted to each other in the way that some males might choose to be. But
Right.
In terms of for people that they've got their vision board and they're visualizing every day and they're saying their affirmations, what are the reasons that the law of attraction is not working for them? Why is it that they're not a vibrational match?
Because they're not big enough. And they're operating from the 3rd dimensional illusion that talks about cause and effect. If I do this, then this, cause, effect, right? What I'd much rather talk about and what we really have to understand is not the law of attraction per se, but the law of expansion. Because what quantum physics tells us is that there are parallel universe, multiple universes. You know, the Wheeler-Graham multiple universe theory, coming right out of Princeton, tells us there are multiple universes that coexist simultaneously right here, right now. In your office, Will, in my office, there are multiple universes that overlay upon each other. That's called the Einstein-Bose condensate. And so consequently, I'm not a vibrational match. You said it correctly, because my frequency is not in harmony with the things that I choose to experience in my life. John Wheeler, the Nobel Prize winner from Princeton, said, we don't create anything. Everything's already created. God creates everything. We choose to participate, his words. We choose to participate in a universe of our own choosing. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to be a vibrational match. So much more than thinking about something or visualizing something, we have to get the feeling of it inside of ourselves. And we have to go what I talked about in my last New York Times bestseller, Harmonic Wealth. We have to go 3 for 3. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions all must be firing in alignment. You look at anyone, Will, who's creating what they desire and deserve, they're going 3 for 3. A lot of people are going 1 for 3 or 2 for 3, but they're missing one. They might be visualizing and they're thinking about it and they're feeling something about it, but they're not acting on it. They're not taking action. Let's please remember that 60% of the word attraction is action. Mm-hmm. It's action, right? So you can't just sit around and think about it and feel good about it and think it's going to happen. It just doesn't work. You've got to take big, bold action. And so again, very complex, but we have to take action based upon who we're becoming, not who we currently are. And that's the scary part, because most people look at their current results and they say, this is who I am, this is what I have. That's not who you are. We're constantly living in this residual of our past thoughts, feelings, and actions, because according to the law of gender, another law of the universe, it takes a certain amount of gestation period for things to come into form. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And so consequently, what we're seeing right now is not who we are, it's who we used to be. It's our past thoughts, feelings, and action. They took it some time to come into form. So if I'm looking at my current results, what I'm doing and what I have, and I'm making decisions based upon what I'm doing and what I have, then I'm going to continue to get what I do and what I have. What we've got to be able to do is turn away from those appearances. As one of the great prophets told us, judge not by appearances. And we got to make decisions based upon and take actions based upon where we're going versus where we are. And that's really frightening. Well, I don't have the money in the bank, James. Well, you don't have the money in the bank because you didn't do it long before now. You didn't take action on it. You see, if you don't take action on it, if you're not willing to take action, then you don't really believe it. You can tell me all day long, but you don't believe what you say you believe unless you'll act on it. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of in terms of the law of attraction, everything you've learned and studied about quantum physics, you applied it for 20 or so years until sort of just towards the end of circa 2009. And you had become one of the world's leading authorities in the personal development space. You'd had over 1 million people come to your events, Oprah, you name it. They'd sort of endorsed the work that you do and you as an individual. And then something quite significant happened in October 2009 for you.
Yeah. My team, my company, and I were involved in a horrible accident in 2009, a tragedy. And I shouldn't say accident because I believe ultimately, in the absolute sense, everything happens for a reason. Now, when I say that, I can't speak for you, Will. I can only speak for myself. And likewise, I can't speak for anyone else involved. I can only speak for myself. And we all have to come to our own reasons. But the bottom line is 3 of my clients, who had become friends, by the way, lost their lives in an experiential learning event that we had called a sweat lodge. They lost their lives. Well, it broke my heart. It was a tragedy. And yet we all have tragedy in our lives. I mean, if with the COVID circus that's going on right now, there are so many people. I don't know about in the UK, but I just read recently there's 100,000 businesses in the US that have shut down that aren't coming back. They're not coming back. And so a lot of people are dealing with difficulty and turbulent times that we're all in. Well, at the end of the day, what are you going to do? So 3 of my clients who became friends because of the nature of the program lost their lives, and the state of Arizona came after me for manslaughter, which is intentional harm. Now, think about this, Will. I don't believe there's an entrepreneur on the planet who would intentionally harm his clients or her clients and think they're going to stay in business, much less stay in their own liberty and freedom. And so it was kind of crazy to me that happened. And yet I ended up losing everything. I went from top of my game, which you mentioned, to solitary confinement. I went through trial. I was convicted, not of manslaughter, because the jury couldn't find one shred of evidence that there was intentional harm, which the state of Arizona said I did it intentionally. But I was convicted of negligence, and I own that. I mean, I take responsibility. Negligence says there's things that could have been done better. Okay, I own that. There's things that were missed. I own that. It was my team. It was my event. It was my choice to do what we now know is a dangerous activity. And so consequently, when you're in leadership position, Will, you don't throw your team under the bus. You don't make excuses. You shoulder the responsibility, and you take what comes. So I ended up going from Beverly Hills and all the things you mentioned, a $10 million company, an Inc. 500 company, to solitary confinement. I went to 2 years in prison. In 2013, I came out in the deserts of Arizona. I was physically broken. I lost almost 40 pounds I didn't need to lose. I had periodontal disease. I was emotionally shattered and disillusioned. I was homeless just 7 years ago, and I was $20 million in debt. So, as a listener today, if you're facing challenges, I get it. And I had to get my head on. And so going back to the illusion that I alluded to earlier, that if you know the law of attraction, you understand how things work, nothing bad is going to happen to you. Well, just look throughout history, Will, and what you'll find is that many people, let's look at Martin Luther King, let's look at John F. Kennedy, let's look at Nelson Mandela, let's look at Mother Teresa. I could name lots of names. Let's look at the Christ. Many people who have done great things in the world have faced tremendous adversity. They haven't had easy lives. And so be careful what you ask for, because we grow the most in the crucible of challenge. We don't grow the most when we're drinking fine wine and smelling the roses. I wish that we did, but we just don't. We grow the most in the crucible of challenge. And that's why this time in our history right now with the COVID circus is the most powerful and most highly potential probability of potential in maybe recent history, if not all of history, because it's a time where we can learn a lot about ourselves. It's a time where we can face the challenges and overcome them and grow and become more than we were before. And that's entirely up to us.
Without a doubt, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, One of the things you touched on a moment ago was responsibility and the importance of taking responsibility, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a leader, it's taking that responsibility. You took that responsibility. For people that think that certain situations aren't their responsibility and they point the finger of blame and say it's this and it's that and it's not my fault. How do you explain to those people that there's the power in taking the responsibility?
Well, I talk about this in great depth and detail in my latest book called The Business of Redemption. And the subtitle is The Price of Leadership. I call it absolute responsibility. I've had some really good teachers in my life. I've had 6 major mentors and teachers, some minors as well, but 6 major ones. And one of them taught me years and years ago, James, you have to take absolute responsibility for every single thing in your life. I go, okay. He said, no, wait a second. I mean, everything in your life. And I said, are you meaning like I have to take responsibility? And this wasn't happening then, but to bring it to today, I have to take responsibility for the COVID circus. Yeah, that's your responsibility. You have to take responsibility for the fact that you lost your job and your income. You have to take responsibility for every single thing, for who runs your country. You have to take responsibility for who's in the US, the current or the next president. On and on and on and on. And so many people will go, what? How is that my responsibility? Well, we could argue over that for a long, long time. But let me ask you, if COVID has hit you and set you back, could you have been more prepared? Could you have been more awake? Could you have been paying attention to what was going on? Or were you asleep at the wheel? Were you overextended financially? That's just a few things. I could give more. But the fact that, if you got the virus and got ill, could you have been more healthy? Could you have focused on boosting your immune system more fully? Could you have eaten better and drank less? Again, there's always a piece there, and it's a tough game to play sometimes. And it seems so much easier to play the blame game because then it's not my fault. It's not my responsibility. I'm going to put it on someone else. And that feels good short term, but long term, it's incredibly disempowering because only when you're willing to take absolute responsibility for every single thing in your life to the extreme are you empowered to do anything about it. As long as you're a victim, either small or large at any level, then you're totally disempowered. You have no ability to transform it or to change it.
Without a doubt. And on that note then, so I've heard you talk before about being bitter or angry or being awake and grateful. And having that choice and taking responsibility, I believe, is the part that enables that decision to be made. Taking responsibility enables you to be grateful, enables you to be awake, and then going to making those decisions, choosing those decisions and being more proactive in that respect. And then you also spoke about good and bad, and ultimately they're all just a matter of perspective when certain situations happen. So your situation that happened back in 2009, and we talk about the law of attraction, the vibrational match. What was it that you feel that brought that situation into your life, or what drew you into that situation at that point to enable that to happen, and what's happened as a result of that?
Well, I'll tell you, there's several things, Will. It's a great question. Several things. And let me talk about the dark side first. Because one of the other laws of the universal law of polarity, there's always a dark and a light. Every up has a down, every in has an out, every good has a bad. And so let me talk about the dark side first, because as I look back in retrospect to where I was in 2009, I was, as you mentioned, I had over 1 million people from 146 countries around the world were coming to me and attending my events and asking me how to live a better life and how to build a better business. And I've never had a silver spoon in my mouth. I was raised very economically poor. I've always scraped and scratched. I started my very first job when I was 6 years old, and I've worked multiple jobs every single day since. And still to this day, I've been up since 4 a.m., Pacific Standard. It's now 1. So, that's 8 hours I've been at it already. And I'm not done. I got a lot of meetings scheduled after this one. And so I've always hustled all my life. And yet I got to a point in 2009 where things started happening. I judged the Miss America contest as a celebrity judge, and Oprah had me on, and I was on the Today Show once a month, and all these things. I had a New York Times bestseller, and I started getting a little arrogant. I started building a little too much hubris. I see this now in retrospect. If you'd asked me then, I'd go, no, but I see it now. I started to hypnotize myself into believing, well, I've done all this hard work to be where I am, and now I've kind of arrived. Well, let me tell you something. That's a dangerous place to be, because the universe, God, spirit, call it what you will, said to me, oh, you got it all figured out, James? Figure this one out. And I got humbled in a big, big way. Now that's the dark side of that. The humbling is good. But the dark side was, I see in retrospect that I was a little carried away with myself. I was believing my own press. The light side of that is that I had said for a long, long time that I was a world thought leader. It was part of my mantra, part of the things I repeated to myself daily, part of the things I visualized. I'm a world thought leader. I want to positively impact over 1 billion people around the world. And so consequently, be careful what you ask for. Because if you're going to be a world thought leader, then you've got to have the experiences of the world. I remember I worked with this, I told you I had 6 major mentors. One of them was a Zen master, and I worked with him for years and years. And he was with me during the whole meltdown. And he said to me, James, how can you even begin to think that you're going to help a suffering world if you haven't suffered greatly? How can you relate to them? Mm. And I didn't like to hear that at the time, because I was angry. I was in anguish as everything started to peel away, and I lost my home, and I lost my life savings, and I lost my Inc. 500 company, and I lost my reputation, and all those things. I didn't want to hear that, but he was really wise. How can you expect to touch a suffering world if you haven't suffered greatly? Because you can't relate to them. You have a lot of book knowledge, and there's a lot of people running around right now, Will, who are giving book reports. Oh, do this. Well, have you experienced this? Well, no, maybe not. Then how can you tell me? So that's the light side of it, is that if you choose to really impact a suffering world and people who are facing tremendous challenges, then you have to go through them, because you don't have the experience to do so. Otherwise, it's just theory.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting that you mentioned, obviously, the light side and the dark side, the law of polarity. And you've quite openly said that for you, it was almost like the pride before the fall, if you like, in terms of how you got humbled. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back and you could humble yourself rather than have the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, humble you, what would you have done back then to humble yourself?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that I would want to go back and change it. I would love to be able to say that I could change that 3 of my clients and friends lost their lives. I mean, that broke my heart, and I still carry that responsibility because it happened on my watch. It was my activity, and I carry that, and I will carry it for the rest of my days. And it breaks my heart. But the rest of it, I don't know that I would want to go back and change it. I learned so much about me and about humanity in prison. And I don't want to do it again. Don't get me wrong, because it was horrible. It was miserable. And yet I learned so much about the human dilemma and the human experience and myself and how I show up in that. And again, we don't have the time to go into all those things here today, but I write very transparently in the Business of Redemption about that whole experience and what it was like for me. So I don't know that I could have been humbled in any other way. I could have been humbler, yes. And yet I also know that there would never have been an opportunity, to my knowledge, for me to learn as much, to grow as much, to practice the things that I had taught for years and years and years than the situation that life put me in that I had to go through. Because there were days, Will, especially early on, where I just curled up in the fetal position. I was just like, God, just take me and recycle me because I can't take this. Well, fortunately, God didn't listen, or we wouldn't be here having this conversation today. But there were so many things that I just didn't think I had the capability to get through, and I did. And so what I know is I'm not any different than you. And so when people say to me, and they know, they read my book, or they see all that happened and what transpired, so many times people say to me, I don't know that I could have made it through what you went through. And I say, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can, because the human spirit is unstoppable. It's bigger and grander and stronger than we could ever imagine when we tap into it. I couldn't tell you that unless I'd been through that.
And I completely empathize with you. I mean, a dear friend of mine, who I've got massive admiration for, who's been in this industry again for many, many decades, had an extremely tragic situation happen with her own husband. And again, it broke her, and she said quite openly, like, I'm supposed to be the expert, I'm supposed to not have to deal with this kind of thing. That was almost like the illusion that she had, and maybe it was the thing that she thought other people should think about her. And I remember 2 years ago, I was going through a lot of adversity myself, and I asked her, like, how do you deal with it? And she just said that her view of it was that I've spent 2 decades or longer learning this stuff so that I can deal with this moment. It's not a case of that just because I've got it, it means that I shouldn't have to. It's because I've got these skills, I can apply them to enable me to get through it. And it sounds like you're very much coming from the same place. And that for me at the time was quite reassuring as someone that works in the industry, going through this significant challenge that I had myself, which wasn't sort of dealing with the tragedy of 3 of your friends and clients, but something that in my own opinion was quite challenging and took a huge amount of willpower and desire and effort and a whole host of other things to be able to work through. But you look back on it, and at the time when people say it to you, you'll look back on this one day and you'll say it's the best thing that ever happened to you. You sort of think to them, who are you? You don't know what I'm experiencing right now, but like you say, you look back on it and you say that is the case. But if there is someone though, because I completely appreciate your very honest answer of saying, well, actually, when you look back, it was the thing that humbled you, and you learned and you gained all those experiences, and I fully appreciate it. But if there's someone right now that is maybe of the view, well, look, I've already sacrificed so much, and I'm benefiting from some of my prizes right now. These are some of my wins, and they're maybe getting that slightly overinflated ego, and to avoid them having to go through significant humbling, what could they do in that instance to humble themselves? If they're at that point, if they're listening to this right now and they maybe have got on the egotistical side, they are maybe getting a bit arrogant, what can they do to humble themselves?
Well, I think this is going to sound a bit esoteric, Will, but the thing that we have to constantly remind ourselves every single day is that we're not doing it. There's in every great tradition, name the tradition, it doesn't matter. Every great tradition tells us there's something bigger than us. And that's something bigger than us. Call it your higher conscious mind, your higher self, God, your soul, whatever, spirit. It doesn't matter what you call it. There's something bigger that works through us than anything that can come from us. And when we start to think it's coming from us, well, we're coming from a finite source. When we realize it's coming through us, then we're coming from an infinite source. And this is scientifically provable. I mean, there's 10 to 55. If you're a listener today, write down that number, 10 to the 50th power. That's the amount of energy in the 0 point field or in this particular universe. That's 10 with 55 zeros after it. Now, come down to the quantum level, and the basic building block of all creation is the atom. Atoms have a nucleus, and every atom has electrons and a proton. Well, here's what we now have proven mathematically and scientifically is that every single proton, we have trillions of cells in our body with billions of atoms within each of those cells. And every one of those atoms has a proton, and every single proton in billions of atoms in trillions of cells, there's 10 to the 55 power, 10 to the 55. So here it is. If you follow, the same power that is in the universe at large is inside of you. And when you are accomplishing things in the world, you're utilizing that universal source and you're accessing that by getting your small self out of the way. When your small self starts to believe it's you, and look at the research, there's the rise of Superman. I can't think of the author's name right now, but it's a really great. Yeah, read his book. He talks about the flow state. My friend MIHWWP wrote the book Flow. What you find in every single arena, whether it's extreme athletics or extreme entrepreneurial pursuits or extreme leadership, is that you come to a point where you're in this flow state and you realize you're really kicking butt, but you also realize you're not the one doing the kicking. Because it's happening so fast, there's no way you can be doing it with your small self. And to the degree, Will, that we can stay in that place, then we become incredibly grateful. We say, hey, maybe I've got a lot going on in my business right now. I had a $10 million business, Inc. 500 company. I didn't do that. It's the power working through me that did that. It's not me. And if we can stand guard at the gate, which is often hard to do, then maybe we stay in that correct frequency. And maybe we don't have to lose as much. But let me also say this. Another law of the universe, which I'm very fond of physics, as you can probably tell, and I've studied it for over 2 decades, is that called the law of rhythm. And the law of rhythm says everything rises and falls. Seasons come and seasons go. Tide comes in, tide goes out. Everything moves in rhythms. Right now in our world, we're in a down rhythm or a winter season, but winter never lasts. Every single winter is always followed by a spring. And sometimes we have really long winters, but there's never been 2 winters in a row. So to the person who's on the top of their game right now, there's going to come a time. Look at the rise and fall of nations. Everything always rises and falls. There's going to come a time where things swing backwards for you. And so that's where I said earlier, take absolute responsibility because it's coming. Winter always comes. And so if you understand the laws and the rhythms of the universe, then you operate in concert with them and you're prepared for them and you don't get sidelined.
So on that note, so this is what I think is really interesting. So utilizing the law of rhythm, and you're talking about winter and summer, and good and bad, I think is always a really interesting one. So winter and summer, they're very clear in nature. They're 2 very different things. But take good and bad situations. Good and bad are just a matter of perspective. So for people right now that think they're doing good, and then obviously they go into the perspective of, and then whatever their expectation is could be that they're going to go in and things are going to get worse. So for people right now that are maybe thinking that they're doing okay, but actually, or they're doing good maybe, but that could be the universe's way of saying, actually, you're doing bad right now and things could get even better. Is that is it down to their perspective, or is it how the universe would see it? If that makes sense in the question I'm asking.
It's both. I'll give you my example. When I had an Inc. 500 company making $10 million a year, keeping $4 million a year. Personally, that was my take home. And everyone goes, wow, that's really great. Well, it's great. And it also sucked because on the flip side of that, I couldn't hang on to a relationship. I was on the road over 250 days a year. I never slept in my home in Beverly Hills, except maybe on Saturday night and Sunday night, or Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and then I get up and hit the road again on Monday. I hadn't visited my second home on the Big Island of Hawaii for over a year because I was too busy. So was that good or was it bad? My lawyer bills and my American Express bill was $30,000 a month. I mean, come on, is that good or is that bad? Everything is both. So now we come to my life now. I live in a modest, nice, condo with my now wife, the most amazing woman on the planet, who I didn't even know in 2013. And are we making the kind of money that I used to make? No. But what's the quality of my life? The quality of my life is amazing. I'm doing what I love. I have the woman that I've waited for all my life. And I'm obviously taking care of the bills, and I'm talking to people like you. So what's really good and bad? It's all perspective. And so everything has a price. There's always a price for the prize. And that's what we often don't realize. Oh, I want to be a billionaire. Okay. Well, if you're going to be a billionaire, then you're going to have $1 billion worth of problems. I guarantee you, it cannot be otherwise, because everything always comes. Every quarter has two sides, both the heads and the tails. And we think we want to just get the heads, but we don't want the tails. Well, you're not going to get any quarters then, because you got to take both. And forgive me, because I know you don't have quarters in the UK, but hopefully you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I definitely get it. I mean, in terms of now, so you've mentioned that you've obviously adapted, you've changed, you've now got, like you say, the most wonderful woman in the world, and you've got this balance of life that maybe you didn't once have. But you've got a mission now, something that you have, that you claim, that you talk about as your legacy, that you want to be your legacy. For those that are listening that are thinking, okay, cool, so I get where you were, I understand your passion for this, but I'm a huge believer in talking about people's North Star. So I refer to as a North Star as the ultimate goal, the goal that we probably will never achieve or certainly see in our lifetime, but it's something we strive towards. It's the guiding light. What's that for you now, James?
It's really simple, Will, and it's a great question. I want to be remembered as an individual who decreased human suffering and increased happiness and fulfillment. That's it. Because that's what we really want. To decrease human suffering, which is rampant right now. I mean, Will, some stats that happened that were going on pre-COVID circus. Every 40 seconds, someone in this world commits suicide. Every 40 seconds. All right. 72%, according to Gallup, of the people surveyed are miserable. They're disengaged, and they're totally unhappy with their daily work. 72%, that's nearly 3/4 of the population. 16.2 million people in the US alone are depressed and on antidepressants. I could go on, but the thing is, something's really awry. Something's not working. And the reason it's not working is because I believe we've sold out meaning for money. We've been driven by economic drivers versus ecological drivers. And we think ecology is just nature, and it's part of nature, but ecology means a harmony of everything, how it works together as a whole. We've traded in, profit, or our purpose, for profit. And we've had all these drivers that say make more money, do more, get more, have more. Look at social media. Not so much right now, because But before the COVID circus, look at my plane, look at my watch, look at me, bling, bling. Well, where are all those people right now? Because that stuff can be gone in a heartbeat. I had over a $20 million net worth and it was gone in 60 days. 60 days, Will. My investment advisor told me you're set for life. Well, no, I wasn't. And so my mission now is to bring redemption. And that's the title of my new book. What does redemption mean? It means to gain or regain something by paying the price. And we all need redemption. We need to redeem ourselves. We need to realign our values. We need to realize that we're suffering and we're chasing the wrong things. And what we really should be going after is not more money, it's more meaning. What we really should be going after is happiness and fulfillment. And to the degree I can do that with one person, 5 people, 10 people, 100,000 people, then I've fulfilled my purpose. And that's good for me.
I absolutely love that. So I'm only saying that there's 3 main books of yours. There's Harmonic Wealth, there's the 7 Laws of True Wealth, and then obviously the most recent book, which is the Business of Redemption. I'm only saying it's those main 3.
Yeah, I have one called Practical Spirituality. I have a book called The Science of Success. And then, of course, I was a co-author of the book, The Secret. But my latest book just came out in February, is The Business of Redemption. And that's the one that kind of talks about some of the things we've talked about here, or it talks in depth and detail about what we've kind of talked about here today. My whole journey from up to 2009 and through till today.
Love that. Thank you so much. So for those those that are listening right now, that have been listening to this and thinking, do you know what, this definitely something I want to go deeper in. Obviously, they can do that via the books we've just mentioned. And then how else can people connect with you, James, and sort of learn more from you and find out more about what you're up to?
Well, I'm all on all social media platforms. James Arthur Ray, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And, my website is just jamesray.com, ray.com. And there's a whole host of free resources there, as well as and surveys you can take about what your unique gifts and purpose are. And there's coaching opportunities and online programs, so much more on jamesray.com. So you can find that all there as well.
Wonderful. So 2 questions before we look at rounding up this, which I'm really grateful for your time over there and have a conversation this afternoon. 2 things. So that's the reason why you're doing what you're doing now, and it's admirable. And obviously your own experiences in the last decade or so are very clear indicators as to a driver as to why that's the case. But what was the reason that you got involved in this world in the beginning, say 30 years or so ago? What was that reason?
It was, I've always been driven to figure out, very curious. I wanted to figure out how the universe worked. And so all the way back to 18 years of age, which is a long time ago, I started becoming this voracious reader, and I've read everything from, as we mentioned, quantum physics to philosophy to psychology. I studied behavioral sciences in traditional school, to business, to mysticism, and I was looking for common threads. And so because I thought if I could put those together, I was a really introverted, shy, the kid who got bullied and picked on in school. And I thought if I could figure it out, then maybe I could improve my life. And I started to improve my life. And as I did, then I thought, well, maybe I have something to share. And so I started sharing first in sales at AT&T. My first job in front of the room or as a teacher was a national sales trainer at AT&T. And then I went to AT&T School of Business, and I was a C-suite consultant there, which really taught me my business chops, if you will. And it just kind of continued to grow. And I believe that we have to come across the full spectrum, from financial to relational to mental to physical to spiritual. And if you leave any of those out, that you're really missing a part of your infinite potential.
Love that. Thank you. And with all that in mind, if you could, which I know you can't, but if you could go back to 17-year-old James, you said you'd got into a lot of this when you were 18, but if you could go and speak to 17-year-old James and tell him one thing, what would be the one thing that you'd tell him?
There's nothing to fear.
Love that.
There's nothing to fear. Wow. If 17-year-old James could get that, then life would have been a lot smoother up till today. It's all going to work out. It always does. And to the viewer today, let me tell you, there's nothing to fear. And there's a lot of things that tell you should fear, but no, those really aren't real, because there's a power working within you that is so much greater than anything life can throw at you. And to the degree you center yourself in that and ground yourself in that, then you really come from that powerful source.
Fantastic. Well, what a fantastic message to finish on. So, James, I just want to say a huge thank you on behalf of obviously myself and everyone that I know will be listening to this on its release and sort of for many, many months and years thereafter. So thank you so much. And hopefully at some point when you're next traveling about, we can connect again. And maybe next time you're over here in the UK, that'll be great. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you so much.
Okay. Stay strong. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.